Walk into a Chrysler dealership this year and count the vehicles wearing the Chrysler badge. You will find one. A single minivan, assembled at the Windsor Assembly plant in Ontario, carrying the name of a company that once owned 3 of Detroit's biggest brands. In 1998, Chrysler earned more profit per vehicle than any other automaker in America, and it sat on roughly $7.5 billion in cash. But that was 1998. How does the most profitable carmaker in Detroit end up as a one-product brand and pull Dodge and Jeep down with it? Chrysler's greatest strength in the 1990s was the exact thing that made it a target. The engineering teams in Auburn Hills, Michigan, could develop a vehicle faster and cheaper than anyone else in the American industry. The minivan lines in Windsor were printing money, and the second-generation LH sedans and the Ram pickup had rebuilt a reputation nearly lost during the bailout years under Lee Iacocca. In 1998, that efficiency looked like the future of car manufacturing. It also looked to an executive in Stuttgart like something you could buy. On the 7th of May, 1998, Daimler-Benz announced a $36 billion merger with Chrysler. It was the largest foreign acquisition of an American company on record. The press conference used the phrase merger of equals. Chairman Jürgen Schrempp called it a marriage made in heaven, while Chrysler chairman Robert Eaton stood beside him and talked about speed and flexibility. But the arithmetic told a different story. Daimler shareholders walked away holding 57% of the combined company. Chrysler shareholders held 43%, and the headquarters that mattered was in Stuttgart, not Auburn Hills. Critics said at the time that this was a takeover wearing a merger's clothing, and that the culture clash between Stuttgart and Auburn Hills would break it apart. Nobody at the podium wanted to hear it, but what does a takeover actually do to a car company if the badges on the dealership signs never change? Here is where the story turns quietly ugly, because the damage did not come from the flag on the Auburn Hills building. It came from the accounting. That $7.5 billion cash reserve, the money Chrysler engineers had planned to spend on the next generation of vehicles, was absorbed upward into the parent company. Former Chrysler designers have described a mandate to cut interior design spending by roughly 40%. That decision seemed small at the time. It was not. So what does a 40% interior budget cut actually look like on a dealership floor? You can see the result parked in used car lots across Michigan to this day. The 2007 Chrysler Sebring and its twin, the Dodge Avenger, arrived with hard plastic dashboards, a strange hood crease, and driving dynamics reviewers struggled to describe. Dodge replaced the Neon with the Caliber, built on a Mitsubishi-derived platform around a continuously variable transmission owners learned to distrust. The Jeep Liberty and the Dodge Nitro shared a platform and shared the reviews. Plymouth, a nameplate that had been building cars since 1928, was shut down in 2001. That brand had been the entry door to the whole company. The car a family bought first before working up to a Dodge and eventually a Chrysler. Closing Plymouth removed the bottom rung of a showroom ladder standing for 70 years, and Chrysler built nothing to replace it. Engineers who had spent careers in the Auburn Hills development studios began leaving for Ford and General Motors, taking the fast, cheap development process that had made Chrysler worth buying in the first place. Daimler could have stopped there, but it did not. However, nothing captures the era quite like the Jeep Cherokee. Not the compact crossover most people picture now, but the boxy XJ, the one with the straight six that ran past 200,000 miles with a shrug. It was profitable and it was reliable, and Daimler discontinued it anyway, while Mercedes kept building far older designs in its own showrooms. You would think someone in Auburn Hills would have raised a hand. If anyone did, it didn't change the plan. However, the accounting eventually catches up with the assembly line. By 2006, Chrysler posted a loss of $1.5 billion and slipped behind Toyota to fourth in the American market. Daimler had spent 8 years extracting cost and produced a company that could no longer fund its own future. Rumors circulated that General Motors might buy the American half. In May of 2007, Daimler sold 80.1% of Chrysler to the private equity firm Cerberus Capital Management for $7.4 billion. Cerberus is named after the three-headed dog guarding the gates of the underworld in Greek mythology, which, looking back, was either an unusually honest branding decision or an accident nobody caught. Read the terms carefully and you find something stranger than a bad sale. Daimler injected billions back into Chrysler to make the deal happen and ended up roughly $1.5 billion out of pocket. The same Stuttgart boardroom that had paid $36 billion 9 years earlier was now paying money to walk away from what was left of Chrysler. Chrysler entered private ownership carrying an estimated $18 billion in health and pension obligations, a thin product pipeline, and no shareholders to answer to. Private equity firms are not built to fund 7-year vehicle development cycles. Chrysler needed somebody who'd spend a decade of money on platforms, returning nothing until the decade after. Cerberus cut headcount, closed plants, and looked for a buyer, while the showrooms filled with vehicles engineered under the previous owner that were already falling behind. 18 months later, the credit markets froze. Chrysler went to Washington asking for federal loans in 2008. In the spring of 2009, under pressure from the Obama administration's Auto Task Force, Chrysler filed for bankruptcy protection. Think about what that sentence would have sounded like, read aloud in Auburn Hills 11 years earlier. Dealerships closed by the hundreds and plants went dark. Some of the oldest brand names in Detroit went through a court proceeding to decide whether they would exist at all. What pulled them out was a small Italian automaker and a chain-smoking executive in a black sweater. Sergio Marchionne took control of Chrysler through Fiat and did something almost nobody expected. He made it profitable again. He walked the factory floors, argued with engineers, and by 2014 had built Fiat Chrysler automobiles into the 7th largest automaker on earth. The Grand Cherokee got real money spent on it, and the Ram 1500 became a truck that could sit next to an F-150 without apology. For the first time since the 1990s, the company was building things people wanted. But the Fiat Rescue came with a trade. And the terms of that trade are the reason Dodge and Jeep dealers are living with the consequences today. In January of 2016, Marchionne announced that Fiat Chrysler would defocus from the American passenger car market. The Dodge Dart and the Chrysler 200 were both killed, with no replacements planned. Marchionne later described the Dart and the 200 as the least financially rewarding investments the company had made in 8 years, and said he couldn't think of one that had gone worse. But the logic was sound on a spreadsheet. Sedan factories were tying up capacity that could build Jeep Cherokees and Ram pickups at far better margin. The Belvidere plant in Illinois that built the Dart was handed to Jeep. So what was the cost of a decision that looked this correct at the time? Every dollar of development money flowed toward SUVs and trucks, and it worked. In 2018, Jeep sold just over 973,000 vehicles in the United States, an all-time record for the brand. That same summer, Sergio Marchionne went into a Zurich hospital for shoulder surgery and never came out. He died in July of 2018 at 66. Jeep has not had a better year since. By January of 2021, Fiat Chrysler had merged again, this time with the French group PSA Peugeot, forming Stellantis. The new chief executive was Carlos Tavares, a Portuguese executive with a reputation for cost discipline and a plan called Dare Forward 2030 that promised to double revenue. For the first 2 years, the numbers coming out of Stellantis were the best in the company's modern history. Margins hit levels Detroit had not seen in decades. But the mechanism behind those margins is where the trouble started. Instead of selling more vehicles, Stellantis sold fewer vehicles at much higher prices. Look at what happened to Jeep specifically. In 2018, the average Jeep transaction price sat about $300 below the American market average. By 2024, the average Jeep was selling for more than $6,000 above the market average, peaking near $54,800. A Wrangler that used to be an accessible weekend vehicle was crossing $60,000 on the window sticker. But the sticker was only the visible half. At the same time, the entry points disappeared. The compact Cherokee, an aging but strong seller in the most contested SUV segment in America, was discontinued in 2023. The Renegade left too. Jeep's own leadership later admitted the brand's market coverage fell from around 80% of the segment's buyers shop to roughly 45%. Dodge ended Charger and Challenger production the same year. The Toyota RAV4 and the Ford Bronco Sport were sitting right there waiting. But the timing of all this is what makes it hard to watch. Inventory piled up on dealer lots. Ram 1500 pickups and Jeep Wagoneers were carrying well over 100 days of supply, roughly 20 days more than their Chevrolet and Ford equivalents. Roughly 2,600 American dealers went into open revolt, sending a formal complaint to Tavares in September of 2024. The United Auto Workers filed grievances from the assembly plants and called for his removal. Through the third quarter of that year, American sales were down 17%, with losses across Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram simultaneously. But price alone would have been survivable. Price paired with a reputation problem was not. In one recent Consumer Reports brand grading, which blends road test scores, safety ratings, predicted reliability, and owner satisfaction, Jeep finished last out of 32 brands. Buyers were asked to pay $6,000 over the market average for vehicles sitting at the bottom of that table. Jeep's American market share fell from around 5.4% in 2019 to roughly 3.7% by 2024. Bob Broderdorf, who took over Jeep's North American operation, put it about as plainly as an executive can at a Los Angeles media event. He said Jeep had confused its buyers and confused its dealers, and that the message had been received. On the 1st of December, 2024, Carlos Tavares resigned with immediate effect. Reporting afterward indicated the Stellantis board had turned unanimously against him. One person close to the board described the situation in a single line that you cannot make enemies with everybody. If you are finding this useful, subscribing helps more of these stories reach the people who lived through them. New breakdowns of American automotive history go up every week. But the pricing was only half of the problem, and the other half was already rolling down the line at the Windsor plant. Dodge had built its identity on the Hemi Vive 8. In 2023, the last full year of the old cars, Dodge sold 75,920 Chargers and 44,960 Challengers. The replacement was the Charger Daytona, an electric muscle car with a synthesized exhaust note played through speakers. In 2025, Dodge sold 7,421 of them. In the first half of 2026, Charger Daytona sales fell to 534 cars. But Dodge was not the only brand running this experiment. Jeep's electric flagship told a similar story. The Wagoneer S sold just under 11,000 units, while the gasoline Grand Cherokee moved roughly 210,000. Then Stellantis reported its result for 2025, a net loss of about $26.3 billion, driven by nearly $30 billion in charges tied largely to unwinding the electric vehicle transition. Stellantis leadership said plainly that it had overestimated how quickly American buyers would leave combustion behind. And through every one of these years, the brand with the family name on the building was quietly running out of vehicles to sell. The Chrysler 200 died in 2017. The 300, the rear-wheel drive sedan built on an old Mercedes platform and the last Chrysler you could order with a Hemi, ended production in 2023 after 18 years. Stellantis had announced in 2021 that Chrysler would go all-electric by 2028, showing the airflow concept in Las Vegas to prove it. Development on that crossover was later paused. The Pacifica minivan, the last product standing, has not been fundamentally redesigned since 2017. Here is the detail that gets missed in all of this. The Pacifica is good. It regularly outsells the Toyota Sienna and the Honda Odyssey, moving over 110,000 units across its variants in 2025 in a segment everyone's been declaring dead for a decade. Chrysler turned 100 years old in June of 2025 with essentially no public celebration and one nameplate left to celebrate with. Now, before this becomes a simple story about foreign owners ruining an American company, the record deserves a fair reading because parts of that story do not hold up. Chrysler was the structurally weakest of the Detroit Three long before Stuttgart got involved. It had survived a federal rescue in 1979 and carried thinner reserves than General Motors or Ford through every downturn, but Marchionne's decision to abandon sedans was financially defensible at the time, and Ford made an almost identical call 3 years later. The electric push was not a Stellantis eccentricity either. Emissions regulations in Europe and fuel economy rules in the United States pointed every automaker in the same direction, and several rivals took comparable losses, unwinding those bets. Tavares also delivered record profitability before the collapse, which is why the board backed him for as long as it did. The consistent thread is not villainy. It is that at 4 separate moments across nearly 30 years, the people holding the keys chose the return available this quarter over the product pipeline available in 5. Each choice was rational alone. Stacked end to end, they removed the vehicles that brought new buyers into these showrooms. So what does a company do once it notices? Antonio Filosa took over as chief executive in June of 2025 and has spent the time since reversing his predecessor. The Hemi 5.8 returned to the Ram 1500. Jeep leadership promised more horsepower across the Wrangler, Gladiator, and Grand Cherokee. The Charger came back with a twin turbocharged inline 6, and demand for the gasoline version climbed sharply while the electric version kept falling. The compact Cherokee returned to showrooms. Ram announced it would re-enter the mid-size pickup segment in 2027, with brand chief Tim Kuniskis saying flatly that they desperately needed a truck there, about as close to an admission of error as this industry gets. In May of 2026, Stellantis announced Fast Lane 2030, a roughly $70 billion plan covering 60 new vehicles. Some of it is working. Jeep broke a 6-year losing streak with a 4% delivery increase in the final quarter of 2025. Ram pickup sales climbed 14% in the second quarter of this year, helped directly by the Hemi 5.8, returning to the 1500. North American shipments rose 38% year over year. Read the fine print of that plan, though. Jeep, Ram, Peugeot, and Fiat were named the 4 core global brands and given 70% of the product investment. Chrysler and Dodge were reclassified as regional players. And for the 2027 model year, the Voyager is being folded back into the Pacifica lineup as a base trim, which means the company Walter Chrysler founded in 1925 will sell exactly 1 vehicle. The second quarter results this July showed a profit of $335 million against a loss the year before. Real progress by any measure. Operating margins sat at 1.8%, and analysts called that figure perplexing. The market is not convinced yet, so the question worth sitting with is not whether Chrysler destroyed itself, because a company can't really manage that on its own. The question is what an American brand actually is once the engineering budget, the entry-level models, and the buyers who used to start there have all been optimized away. Jeep is selling again, and the Hemi is back in the showroom, though the badge on that Windsor minivan still stands alone. But the compact Cherokee buyer who left for a RAV4 in 2023 has now owned that Toyota for 3 years and hasn't had a reason to look back. And nobody at Auburn Hills knows yet whether she is coming back. Next week, we are looking at the Ram brand specifically, and the midsize truck segment that Stellantis walked away from and now says it has to win back. Subscribe, and that one will find you when it goes up.